Hi, everybody. Good morning. We are today talking about the future of entrepreneurship. I'm Jen, I was previously noted. Our goal is to explore how entrepreneurship is evolving across North America, what trends, technologies, and policy approaches are shaping opportunities for startups and small businesses in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. We have an incredible panel here today. I'm going to start first with Keith. Keith Hall is the President and Chief Executive Officer of the National Association of the Self-Employed. He has previously served as the National Tax Advisor for NACE, where he offered personalized tax advice, as well as international accounting, working with clients in banking, insurance, and other financial services. Claudia Núñez, the President and CEO of FinTech Mexico, representing over 200 companies. Sorry, I'm going to switch here. Pedro's not able to be here with us today, so we're switching things up a little bit. She's driving the convergence of finance and technology in Mexico. She's an expert in financial inclusion, digital innovation, and regulatory modernization. And Cassandra Dorrington is the President and CEO of the Canadian Aboriginal and Minority Supplier Council. She champions supplier diversity, economic inclusion, and cross-border business growth in Canada and globally. Welcome. Okay, to all, I'd like to hear your perspective of the future landscape of entrepreneurship in North America. What are the most important trends shaping new business creation, and how should funders adapt to them? Keith, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Jen. Thanks for having me here. I would like for everyone to note, this is a first for me, because I am officially the best looking man on this panel. that has never happened to me before. I think to me the biggest trend for the growth of entrepreneurship today is awareness. I think the easy answer when I was thinking this through was to say technology, because technology has put in so many people in a better position to serve their communities and to serve the worldwide market. But I think today the key is awareness of that technology. I think many small businesses, this is one of the silver linings from COVID, if you will. People had to stay home. They learned the technologies that were already available. Many of the technologies that we take for granted today were in existence then, but many small business owners didn't use them, didn't need them, didn't think about them. But now they're sitting at their kitchen table, they got the kids off to school, and I think some of those tools became much more evident to them. And I think that dramatically shrunk the world almost overnight. And so I think awareness of that technology, awareness of what that can do for your personal market, even within your small community, as we expand throughout North America, I think even the smallest of businesses can use those tools. So I think events like this, I think as we go back to our homes, to our associations, to our groups that we represent, maintaining the goal of increasing that awareness, the awareness of the tools that are available, awareness of the markets that are available. I think that the word awareness, I think, becomes more and more important to me as we go forward. And I think that's the key word for the new growth in entrepreneurship.
Awesome. Do you want to take this next? Do you want to take it too? Claudia.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm actually a super North American person. So I lived in Canada for 8 years, and I lived in the States for 7. So it's always a pleasure to be here to talk about entrepreneurship today. And I mean, the association, as you said, it grew. We just turned 10 years in September. It grew from 5 companies to over 200 right now. And I think what we are still focused and what we're still obsessed with and the trends that we see are kind of the same. And there are 3 that I would like to share with you. The first one has to do with being completely obsessed with our customers. We design, we think, we innovate, always around what our customers need and what our customers want. Second, technology. We do think that technology is a trend that is going to continue, but not in the way of just technology in the abstract, which is what I think you were referring to, but technology as a means to really make sure that we improve the lives of people. Just so you get an idea, in Mexico, there's 40% of adults that are unbanked. That's really, really high. First-time clients that ask for a loan are rejected 75% of the time, so there's a huge opportunity there. And then women only get 38% of the credits, even though we are less likely to default by 30% compared to men. So that's the second thing that we're observing. And the third one has to do with innovation. And I think that is very related to the point of awareness, right? The world keeps changing and regulation changes, technology changes, consumer behavior and preferences change. So we have to be very aware of what's happening around so we can really design and create products and and services that help the customers that we want to really serve. So those would be the three. Thank you.
Awesome.
Okay, so let me weigh in on this. Good morning, one and all. When I think of sort of entrepreneurship, I love what I've heard all together. I grew up in a world where it was get a job. But now what I'm seeing now is we're seeing more young people who are thinking about entrepreneurship as an opening, as an opportunity. And what we've seen as well in our country, one of the key things is financing these young entrepreneurs. So this access to capital has been a huge issue that's now driving the entrepreneurship we've seen. And the other thing is we're now, after COVID, we lived in a little bubble. I don't know about you, I lived in my little neighborhood, I lived in my country. And what we now see is that our entrepreneurs are now going cross borders. They're no longer doing something in their neighborhood anymore. We're now seeing that whole globalization of the entrepreneurs that they have identified a product, they're with e-commerce selling it to wherever in the world. So those are the key factors I see that are driving the entrepreneurship in the Canadian region for sure.
I was in a conference in Greece like last month, and one of the cool things that they had was the eyeglasses that translate when people are speaking to you. It just makes the world so much smaller when you can actually understand. It makes language not a barrier anymore, which is super cool. Okay, talking about access to capital, one of the biggest hurdles for entrepreneurs. Across US, Mexico, and Canada, do current financial models provide the pathways for growth? Are new approaches, cross-border financing, risk sharing, or FinTech innovations emerging that can unlock more opportunities? Claudia, we'll start with you on that one. This is your expertise.
Sure. Thank you. Well, yeah, I think definitely fintechs are providing better access to capital. And I think there's two ways to approach the question. The first one has to do with open finance and alternative data. Because what we're seeing is that a lot of the customers here in Mexico are not part of the formal system, and they do need access to capital, but they don't have a way to actually be able to prove that they're creditworthy. So by developing models that can give information about your credit health that are not the traditional ones, you're really able to serve these clients that would otherwise be rejected, as I was saying, with the 75% of individuals that do not have access to these credits as a first-time loan applicant. And the second way of looking at it has to do with just using technology and financial models to have more information and data around your sales, around your profits, around your customers, and how all of that increases the amount of capital that the business generates, which is in itself a source of additional capital for companies to continue reinvesting and growing. So those are the two things that we're seeing very clearly in the fintech sector.
Let me add to that. In the Canadian model, you're absolutely right. What we've seen in Canada is the traditional banks, their ability to loan to the individuals, like, oh, they don't quite meet all the criteria. So what the government has done is the government has come out and they've actually put funding in for, whether it be women entrepreneurs, black entrepreneurs, indigenous entrepreneurs. They've been very clear that we need to get financing in the hand of these entrepreneurs if we're going to be able to grow them. So they've taken They've taken some policy statements and put things in place that they've funded by, hundreds of millions of dollars to have money in those pockets. But what we haven't done very well is that whole scale-up process. So I can fund a small entrepreneur here, but how do I scale them up so they're big enough to respond to the supply chain need from a big corporation? That's where we have to work, and that as we go cross-border, we need to make sure that scale-up comes in. Are we bringing clients together, these small businesses together, so they become a bigger entity to bid on opportunities? Because we need to be able to grow to that extent if we're going to see this globalization work.
A lot of times, too, they don't know what they're growing when they first start, and so knowing how to get the capital that they need and why they actually even need it, so they know what their end game is going to look like, super important. Okay, Keith, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think one of the things that a lot of small businesses leave out is the future part of their plan. I think most of them who are looking for capital, and we do a survey of our members every year and have forever, access to capital is always the number one or the number two problem that small business owners are facing. Whether it's existing operations or trying to grow, getting that next employee, that next location, but that access to capital has always been one of the big problems. And I think they have relationships with their local bankers, they go through the SBA, there's lots of opportunities out there. But I think the status quo is to build your results of operations. Look at your financial statements. This is what we do. This is what our list of assets look like. Are we creditworthy to you, my banker, or my angel investor? And I think the piece that a lot of them leave out is that future projection process. Where am I going to be 3 years from now? What do I want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? Most lenders want to see that. And I think the FinTech tools, new AI models, help with that projection process. Because again, a lot of small business owners are good at what they do. They're good at the restaurant. They're good at being a lawyer. They're good at being a CPA. But they're not really necessarily good at seeing where they want to be 5 years from now. So relying on that technology, investing in that technology, trying out that technology to look at where do you want to be? Where are we going to be? And I think that's the story that really makes access to capital easier. If you can plot that story, the future, the fantasy, if you will, for your bank, this is where we're going to be. I think that's very important.
Thank you. One other thing too, in the United States, a small business is categorized by a business owner that has under 500 employees, which is a very, very big business. And so a lot of times in the access to capital conversation, the banks aren't willing to lend to micro businesses because they're just too risky. So it's like figuring out different things like the FinTech solutions is a really big, important deal. Okay, for many small and medium enterprises, selling beyond their home market remains challenging. What supports, policy, networks, mentorship would make these cross-border expansions more realistic? Cassandra, we'll start with you.
Okay. Let me start by saying, if you know any Canadians, Canadians probably have the most passports. You know, we probably have 70% of our population has passports, but it means everybody's travels. But the nice thing about that is, as our businesses are looking to do work, they're able to go wherever. The Canadian government has been out, and they have probably the most free trade agreements globally, which means they've laid the groundwork for our business owners to be able to tour the world and set up shop or work with clients. So what we've done inside of that, we've also have, with our World Trade Centers, we also have, you know, preparation to get people ready to travel, ready to do trade missions, ready to do work in other countries. Because there's no sense just showing up saying I'm ready for work without knowing the traditions, knowing the regulations, the policies. So we do a lot of that advanced work to get them ready. We also have a series of what we've done with the Canadian government, with my association, many associations, we do preliminary trade missions. So we're taking people across to kick the tires, to meet, to build those relationships. It's important for them to actually be in country. And when you go in country, there's a lot of things. You meet people and they're like, they meet another business, and, oh, we can do a business together. That becomes very exciting until you start to work through the details. Do they have the financing? Do they have the same values and all that? So the trade missions allow them to go through that preliminary and identify where the real opportunities. Then we start with the financing to get them. So we do a lot of that preliminary work, getting our suppliers and businesses ready. And the other part then becomes, I also work with corporations who want to take suppliers globally with them. So, you know, if you're a Cisco and you have a great supplier in Canada, they might work well for you in the US. They might work well for you in Australia. So we're trying to make sure we have the supports in place, the connections into the country for partners in country, resources in country that they can work with as they begin to grow. Because while it all sounds exciting and sexy to do work in another country, it's incredibly, it needs a lot of attention to detail. It needs a lot of attention to the regulations, a lot of attention to who's in country, where are my partners in country, where are my resources in country. That's why when corporations come to councils like NMSDC, CAMSC, WeBank, they're coming because we have in-country personnel that will help them to not make mistakes in finding suppliers and being able to deliver on opportunities.
Awesome. Claudia, do you want to add any thoughts on financial or regulatory tools that make scaling easier?
Yeah, sure. I don't know how many people here love board games, but I'm a huge fan. So now imagine that I invite you on a Saturday home, and I put the board in front of us, and everybody has different set of rules. We have different chips to be able to play, and we have glasses that give us a different lens of what we're seeing, right? So when you think of regulation, I think it's a little bit of the same when you're thinking of integration between these three countries, right? One, you want to make sure that the rules are the same for everyone, so you want to harmonize procedures, because you want to make sure that all of these policies that are in place and all the things that companies have to follow, especially small companies that carry most of the regulatory burden, are able to do this in a way that is simplified and that is easy to understand, that they don't have to go through the same process once in Mexico, once in Canada, once in the States, right? You would ideally want that to be the same for the three regions. Second, you want to make sure that the infrastructure and the connectivity within the three countries is really up to its maximum capacity. There's some places that are half an hour drive from Mexico City that don't have internet connection. And probably that's less likely in Canada or in the States, but it's still something that's real. So in Mexico, 99.8% of productive units are SMEs. So this tells you that most of these companies are most likely situated in places where there's no connectivity. So if you want to make them part of the board game and you want to make them part of the system, you really have to make sure that they have access to the internet. And third, you want to make sure, you were saying this a little bit, but that they're trained, that they understand that there's digitalization, and digitalization is different to connectivity. Connectivity is the right to be able to connect to the internet. Digitalization has to do with understanding why that is important and that how that can really transform the way that you're conducting businesses. So those are the three things that I would focus on.
Okay, and sort of into that is the whole technology piece. Technology can lower barriers, but also widen gaps. How can AI, digital platforms, and automation strengthen small business competitiveness rather than leave smaller firms behind? Do you want to continue on in that? Yeah.
Sure, I think, and this has to do a lot with the point that I was referring to 2 questions ago. And we have to understand that technology, fintechs, and all of these things that we're talking about today, they're in service of creating better lives for humans. And I think as society, we have a huge debt in terms of social mobility, in terms of really making sure that everybody is included in the system. And there's certain leverages that were promised to us centuries ago that were going to transform the way that humans were able to interact with each other, that were able to really equalize the human experience. And those had to do with education and with health. And I think we all know that the extremely complex systems that we're witnessing are not necessarily going to be able to be solved for in our lifetimes. But when we think of fintechs, I think there's still a huge, huge, huge opportunity to create levers that will really equalize the way that businesses are conducted and how that creates economic wealth for societies and how that wealth is distributed amongst fair wages. So you have to tie that to the answer about why the tools are useful, right? Why fintechs are useful. Because there are all of these softwares that really help companies, as I was saying, be able to track data that is non-alternative data. That is alternative data that allows them to get access to credit, that allows them to get better training, that allows them to do all of this. But it's in the means of creating something bigger for ourselves. And I think using that technology to really understand the weak spots of businesses and really their strengths, to be able to increase the amount of profits that they have to reinvest that in their companies, is what all of this technology can really be useful for.
Awesome. Keith, do you want to add to that?
Of course. I think as you go forward, and most of you who have seen me before have heard me say this, that it is my belief that the number one asset almost every small business owner has is time. Their time. And I don't believe, if you look at people that look like me, the people who look like me typically have less confidence in what AI is going to be or can be than someone who might look younger than me. You can draw an age line there somewhere. It is my belief that AI, financial tools, innovative tools, they will never be able to close your next customer. That is always going to be a relationship thing. However, those tools can help you find that next customer. Do the initial consult with that next customer. Let that customer be aware of the services that you provide. AI, financial tools will never be able to close your new access to capital, your new loan. That's always going to be a relationship thing. It's going to be about you selling yourself and that business. But these tools can help expand the options that you have to have that first conversation with that lending institution. So I think utilizing those tools is critical to expand the availability of time. Now, I'm an accountant type, so I always tend to run to the numbers, but if you're a small business owner and you work 40 hours a week, which is kind of a joke, no small business owner ever just works 40 hours a week, but if you can find the AI tool that helps you with communication, that helps you with scheduling, that helps you with outbound emails to potential customers, whatever process, if you can generate 1 hour of time saving for yourself, that's 2.5% of your week. So think about increasing our GDP or growth or international cooperation by 2.5%. That is a big number. If everyone could save 1 hour by investing their own time in technology and learning one function that can save 1 hour, that is a huge benefit for all of North America. So I still go back to time. It's kind of scary, again, for me, for people of my age, it's scary to think about some of these tools because what does that mean? I don't know if everybody watched Terminator, but there's scary things out there. But if you can look at this as an opportunity to be more efficient, to save 1 hour a week, that's a huge investment in your own future.
If I can just weigh in on that, when I think of my suppliers, cybersecurity and AI are huge, absolutely huge. Because if you're going to do business with a corporation, your cybersecurity, how safe is your data? You're not getting close to that without making sure that. So we need to make sure we have either policy and or training so our suppliers understand how to do that. Now AI has emerged, AI has been on the scene for a while, but now it's emerged as the biggest issue out there. We talk about AI sovereignty. Where's that? You know, there's a whole bunch of issues around that. We now have to get training in place for our suppliers to understand how to use it effectively, as you just said. But also, sort of, what does it mean in the scheme of things? It doesn't erase a whole bunch of things. It adds to the complexity of what we're talking about now. And I don't think we've spent enough time and attention with policy development and or training around that so that our suppliers are ready to meet the need for what that looks like. Because, I mean, that's in our face. And if you remember, it wasn't too long ago we were talking the internet, I think. Everyone went from there to blockchain, and it just kept going. We haven't gotten smarter, it's just gotten more complex. And we need to make sure we have some policy work around AI. I know Canada's actually put in a ministry of AI to start looking at what that looks like. And so therefore, if our suppliers are going global, they have to understand how that works into the scheme of things.
It could be scary. I mean, it's super cool, but it's pretty scary too. One of our big talking points is also about the security framework around AI and not knowing like how much data can you actually put in there before it's available for everybody to see. Okay, where does regulation enable entrepreneurship and where does it constrain it? What policy changes or support structures are most needed today across North America? Want to start with that one?
Sure. I think you've heard throughout this panel and yesterday, last night, that having a level playing field, I think is very important. I think for the smallest of small businesses, who we represent, influencing governmental regulations, influencing international trade, cooperation amongst all of North American, it's daunting. That seems scary. How do you even do that? And I think for the smallest of small businesses, I think the key point is to stay connected. You know, groups like this, you know, as we build relationships from the ground up, I don't know if you can visualize building a bridge, starting across from one side and starting on this side. Hopefully they meet in the middle. But the government regulation may be at the top of the end. The bottom part of that is small businesses working together across borders. I think building relationships like this, building whether it's supply chain or demand process, actual sales, any of those type of things that expand our own markets, expand our communities to be North America wide, I think that's what we can do on a daily basis. And I'll leave it to the people much smarter than me to deal with the government regulations. But at our level, maintaining meetings like this, communicating with one another, building relationships together, I think that's the critical point.
Cassandra?
Yeah, when I think of the policy work, in my younger years, I might not have been involved in government policy thinking that just happens. I now realize the importance of having a voice at the table. So as our government is working through, whether it be the CUSMA, whether it be some of our, we have many free trade agreements sort of in the Pacific region and everything else, we need a voice at the table from the small business person. We need a voice from the diverse small businesses saying, how do I fit in as you're developing that trade agreement? What does it look like? And so therefore, I'm encouraging all my business owners to be part of the consultation, to be part of that so their voice is heard and involved in that policy work. Right now in Canada, much like in the US has a Buy American. In our nation building projects, one of the things that our Prime Minister is now talking about is, you know, if we have Buy Canada, what does that look like in some of our key projects? So I have my suppliers now, I want you at the table saying, what does that look like when you say Buy Canada? We have this integrated supply chain, so it's really hard to separate what that looks like. But you need to have a voice at the table so they're thinking about what your concerns are as we go forward. So I agree with you at the base of it, we do relationships. But as I got older, I realized that policy work and having been written in policy, black and white in policy, that's where the difference is really made.
And Claudia, did you want to add?
Sure, I mean, regarding policy, it's really about building the ecosystem. So everything both my colleagues just said, it's not one single thing, it's about the relationships. It's about the regulation locally, internationally. And it's also about just creating policies that are gonna really motivate and incentivize people going into that sector, right? So for example, last week, Minister Ebrard announced that there's gonna be a program that's gonna be relaunched for entrepreneurs in Mexico, where they're gonna be financing with 40 million this year and up to 80 million next year, a whole ecosystem that has to do with funding, but it has to do with mentorship, it has to do with being contained, because those of us who have been an entrepreneur know that it's a roller coaster. So I think it has to do with policy, and it's about being part of the conversation with the government, but it's about being part of the conversation as citizens, right? Because there's not one single actor that can solve for the whole ecosystem. And it's built amongst the actions that we all take individually and collectively then really are able to shape ecosystems in the way that we want, so that can translate, again, as I was saying earlier, in a better life for most of the population that inhabits our countries.
Yeah, I think what Rhett and John have created here is really amazing, like bringing all of the sectors together to talk about these important issues. I think that so many things are in silos, and it's really important to like blend it all together. Okay, to close, I'd like each of you to share one actionable takeaway for entrepreneurs or policymakers who want to strengthen the North American entrepreneurial ecosystem. One sentence each.
One sentence.
Yeah. Well, we have 3.5 minutes, so maybe a sentence and a half.
I'm going to take the whole. I'm going to take the whole 3 minutes.
Okay. No, don't.
I think we started by saying awareness, having the awareness for this type of concept. I would love to know the number of small businesses represented by the groups here. The associations here, individual business owners, chambers, that's a big number. If we leave here and we go back with a commitment to increase that awareness to what we started building here, I think that's the key takeaway.
Awesome, Claudia.
Yeah, for us, the main key takeaway is financial well-being. 10 years ago, we started talking about financial inclusion and how it was about having the largest amount of customers. And now it's really about how do you create financial well-being for that person by giving them a loan or a product or a service at the rate that is correct for them, at the amount that is correct for them, for the term that is correct for them. And that's very personalized for each individual. Mm-hmm. So if there's one thing I would love for all of you to remember from this panel is, it is about financial well-being for our customers.
For me, I come back to the suppliers. I want my suppliers to think globally, think international. We grew up in a space where it was a very small environment. I want them now be prepared to do that by delving into, you know, what the World Trade Centers do, what the governments do, what's available. Our government and other governments have done so much to make this a platform that you can go and do trade wherever. Our suppliers are not taking advantage of all the resources available. And so I'd like them to think about and talk to, whether it be World Trade, talk to the Trade Commission, talk to whatever, find out what resources are available, that they don't have to dig in their own pockets, they just have to show up and use what we put in place. And therefore, then if we do that, we'll have a lot more trade going on.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. So now is the time, right? The small businesses are popping up every minute, millions of them. So it's our time now to come together and figure out how to best support so we can grow. Thank you, everybody. We did it in a minute left.
Thank you.